by funky? Yeah.
Well, in relationship to the tonic.
How the harmony is functioning within the key centers. Right. How it relates to the tonic. Right. How the harmony is actually functioning. Because once we start to do that, we're starting to develop two very important skills. One of them is we're starting to unlock the harmonic code of the piece of music. Very important. Second is that we have a framework now to be able to use that to take it to other keys, which is going to be an important skill for all of us to learn, to make sure that we can take and play autumn leaves in all the keys. Now, people often talk about, yeah, you need to know your tunes in all 12 keys. Yes, you do. Start with one. Okay? Once you get this kind of solid framework down, then go to another key. Okay? Sometimes, again, it's that whole thing about getting a little too overwhelmed by the totality of everything that you've got to do. Right? You've got to set yourself up for success all the time with this. So when I'm playing, doesn't matter what key I'm in, when I'm playing Autumn Leaves, I'm not thinking if I'm in B flat, C minor, F7, B flat. I'm thinking 2, 5, 1, 4. Then I'm thinking we're going 2, 5, 1 to the relative minor. And then I pivot till we get back 2, 5, 1, 4. Then I know I'm going to the relative minor 2, 5, 1. And I know for the bridge I'm going, it's being that same 2, 5, 1 in relative minor, then I'm going 2, 5, 1, 4 to the relative major, back to the relative minor, 2, 5, 1. But this actually becomes what I call a pivot chord because we're getting ready to cycle down to E flat major and then 2, 5, 1. So I'm not thinking about, oh, there's G minor 7 or here or C7 there. I'm thinking about the function of the harmony because that's always a very important thing to do. I was telling my students in the ensemble earlier today, I had this teacher in college, his name was Bill Fielder, and we called him Prof. And Prof was Wynton Marsalis's teacher, he was Terence Blanchard's teacher, he was he taught Mulgrew Miller. He was a trumpet player, but just like an amazing musical mind. Prof had this thing that he would do. Prof was also kind of like partially blind, so he'd be kind of like going back and forth to the student center, getting a coffee, spilling it on his shirt. You know, he was like the typical kind of absent-minded professor. But somehow, even like through his blindness, like he could see you somehow, like walking down the street. And he'd be like, Tom, in the 5th bar of all the things you are, in the key of E flat major, what's the chord? Prof, I was just trying to get a cup of coffee. Oh, what's the chord? So, like, you'd have to think about, okay, if I'm in the key of E flat major and I'm going on the 5th, well, the 5th bar, that goes to the 4 chord of whatever key I'm in, so that's A flat major. Right? So you'd have to, you'd have to do these, these different kinds of things. So that skill actually helped me to do so. That gets me to kind of my next point, is that we're talking about practicing things that when we're in the practice room and how we go about it. But there's a lot of practicing that you can do away from your instrument. A lot of practicing I still do away from my instrument. You know, as a New Yorker, you spend lots of time on the subway and the bus and this and that. And that's time that you can kind of waste away on just moving yourself from point A to point B, or you can try to get something done in there. So doing these kinds of things, like when you're, I also talked about this with the ensemble class earlier, about, you can always have your music with you and be looking at your music and starting to visualize your music and being able to understand functional harmony. If you take a tune and start to, really start to dissect the chord changes, the first time you go through this with understanding functional harmony, it might take you a couple hours to figure it out. It might take you an hour. It might take you a half an hour. But let's say it takes you an hour. Well, the next one might take you 50 minutes. The next one after that might take you 35. And then it's going to go down and down because you're basically developing that musical muscle. I often talk about this too, because I think of various aspects of our musicianship in terms of musical muscles. Hearing intervals might be a tough thing for you, but it's not impossible because you've been exposed to all of these intervals before. What you're doing when you're ear training is you're taking what you've already heard and finding a way to categorize it, finding a way to organize it so that you can make sort of quasi-intellectual decisions about what you're hearing. And in doing that, it's just a matter of developing that muscle. That muscle is there. It's like if you haven't been to the gym in a while and all of a sudden you try to bench press 100 pounds, you might not be able to do it. Start with 10, start with 5, go from there, and continue to build it up. And then once you develop that muscle, that's there. And it needs constant reinforcement. I still practice ear training. I still practice sight reading. I still practice all of that kind of stuff. It's something that you want to make sure that you're always aware of. It's like if you can't get something, it's not because you can't do it. It just hasn't been developed yet. All right. You can do whatever you want. The possibilities are really completely endless. It's all really a matter of how you're approaching it and how you're setting yourself up for success with this. Do a good practice.
Yeah, I don't do enough ear trainings. I just thought of this idea of how something could do on the subway, something that's realistic, to pick one of the jazz scales, attach solfege to it, and then try to create like 3-note riffs off of that particular scale.
You could do that.
That's maybe it's too much to do.
If you heard this,
So major third.
it's also the doors are closing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So finding different things that you're hearing, if that's a fine exercise if that's appropriate for where you are with your ear training. Okay. But there are certain things that you can do. You have to kind of judge whether that's appropriate or not for the level that you're at. There's all sorts of things that you can try. You can try to hear a melody in your head and try to write it down. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you get home, see how close you got, and where did you go wrong? Where did you, those kinds of things you can work on being able to write out the melody to Happy Birthday. Work out being able to write out the melody to When the Saints Go Marching In.
And do those sorts of things. I wanted to try to make it a little more bluesy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you can do those, yeah, then.
Those sort of things. I'm not perfect at it.
Right.
Like those simple melodies, I can do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, something from my experience is that I can do those things, but I still do them.
Yeah.
I still will work within, you mentioned, like When the Saints. I mean, I can rattle off all the numbers to When the Saints, yet I still do that. And in some ways, the repetition over decades is really, really helpful.
Right.
So I never think of practice as being where, I'm done with that. I've learned my scales. In some ways I sort of have. I mean, I can really play all my diminished, all my majors, minors, blah, blah, blah. There's hundreds of scales that, yes, I can play. I expect myself to be able to play them. Yet, when I wake up and I pick up the saxophone or go to the piano, either one, I don't hesitate to play my C major scale. It's not just for, some Zen centering or anything like that. It's because the C major scale is asking me to play it. And I can benefit from continuing to go back to those roots and work on that. I'm going to hear something differently. that I did not pick up. It's funny, all the things you are, Tom mentioned this tune and going through and prof, bar 5, what chord is it? Well, I gotta say, when I was 16 years old, I had been playing jazz saxophone for maybe 4 years at that point. And I was okay, I could do some stuff on the saxophone, it was good. Wynton Marsalis, very famously, there was a video, there was obviously no YouTube at the time, so there were very few videos, but there was a video of Wynton Marsalis, Tom, I'll bet you know it, where he says, you've got to learn 3 tunes in all 12 keys, and one of the tunes was All the Things You Are. So what did I do? I had a computer program before Finale called Digital Performer, and I typed in, I didn't have a computer, I went over to a friend's house and I typed in the chords to All the Things You Are, clicked the button and transposed it 11 times, and I printed out all 12 versions of All the Things You Are so that I could learn it in all 12 keys. It was such a disaster. For years, I had these 12 pages. All the Things You Are is not in 1 key. It's in 5 keys. It's in more keys than any other standard I can think of right now. So that's 125, no, more than that. How many keys at once? 60.
55. Times 11.
It's a lot of keys.
Yeah. 60.
Way too many. It was a total disaster because I didn't know functional harmony. The way that I learned jazz at first was playing written jazz solos. This was very typical, by the way, of someone working on jazz in the 80s. Because jazz was still actually called stage band in a lot of places, and a lot of people played written solos. I was a player when I first started, I played a lot of written solos. I didn't even understand the first thing about functional harmony, even what that term meant. So it took me a long time to look even at one new key of All the Things You Are and process it. Frankly, it was a completely wasted effort. I spent so many hours working on those 12 pages. I got nothing from it because it was way too advanced, way too early, and frankly, it was a completely opposite approach to learning all 12 keys, in part because I didn't even know 1 key at the time. So the advice is great advice in a context that includes many, many years, and in a context that makes sure you say, yes, I have a plan to get there. Not, okay, yes, sir, I'm going to learn all 12 keys of All the Things You Are right now. Because you might, if you take that and you try to do that now, you might crumble and melt, and it might be horrific. However, if you say, you know what, I'm going to see if I can get to bar 5 in 1 key,
Right.
you're going to love it. You're going to be like, ah, yes, I can do this. And that's great. You know, maybe not even bar 5. Maybe all you do is loop the first 4 bars of All the Things You Are, or maybe even the first bar of All the Things You Are. Learn one little bit of it.
You just actually made me realize something, because I'm working on my timing, and the lesson was, really to get a really strong hold with just 1, and then 2, 3, and 4, and I'm really working on that, and it's humbling because, that could actually benefit me at my stage, and it is, so that's really humbling. And now it's the same thing with transposing melody. It's like, I'm probably not as good at transposing diatonic melodies as I used to be, and if I can get better at that again, then it'll make it easier for me to transcribe a jazz solo or anything else, so to go back to the basics is really important.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too that learning your repertoire teaches you is what goes into a strong melody, and what goes into the shape of a strong melody. One of the things we're often talking about applying this scale to that chord, and it's like, well, how do I get it to sound melodic? How do I get, melodies? All of your answers to all of your questions are in the music and in the recordings. Like, if you sit with the music, if you learn your standards, if you learn your melodies, and correctly, don't be shucking and driving on the rhythms or anything else like that. If you learn them efficiently and accurately, you're going to not only learn the songs, which are going to be vehicles for you to use in performance and improvisation, but you're also going to be learning what goes into a good melody. Just like when I went through analyzing the melody of Autumn Leaves. Oh, it's a sequence. It's a motivic sequence, right? So that, you know. That gets me through the first A section, right? That gets me through. It gets it's something, you know, if you. Someplace to go from there. So learning melodies will teach you those kinds of important things. I know we kind of got to wrap up here, but I'm wondering, is there any questions people have about practicing or other things that you'd like to